Welcome to Not Entirely Unlike Tea with Christine Collins. Hey there, it's Christine Collins, and for today I have for us an interesting discussion that will be relevant for you if you are an entrepreneur who creates marketing and content and copy, or if you are any type of content creator who has an audience and your goal is to have ethical, engaging, and effective content. Now, a lot of times when we talk about buyer personas or we hear about them, it comes out in the context of marketing strategies and can sometimes even slant towards being a little bit like manipulative marketing. And so we are going to take a very different approach here. Our focus is delivering high quality, engaging content, reaching people where they are, and meeting their needs, providing quality service, and designing our message with a method that is neuro-informed, that we have a perspective, we understand some of the psychology behind how people make decisions, and the goal is to create our systems and strategies in a way that is ethical with that understanding, as opposed to manipulative marketing. So the first piece of this is desire-focused or desire-based marketing and messaging. There is a whole lot of pain dialing marketing, and you have most likely been exposed to it yourself. So I'm talking about an ad or a commercial or a piece of content that deliberately aims to dial up a pain point or something that makes you feel uncomfortable or bad about yourself in order to sell a product or a service. And of course, I've talked at great length about how unnecessary this is, as well as how impractical it is once you understand psychology and some of the neuroscience behind how people actually make decisions and what they're drawn towards and away from. So in terms of the first buyer persona, when we look at towards versus away, we are looking at people who are more motivated by moving closer towards something that they desire versus moving away from something that's painful or uncomfortable or unpleasant. And while both can be relevant in terms of understanding buyer personas, in terms of marketing, desire-focused marketing is actually a lot more effective. And the reason for that is because it is more difficult to conjure up a sensation of the absence of something than it is to think about the presence of something. And a very well-known example that is very commonly used, and perhaps you've even heard it before yourself, is if someone were to say to you, whatever you do, do not think of a pink elephant. And I like to change it up and use other things like, don't think of a strawberry tart. Don't think of a piece of cake. The very first thing that your brain will do is conjure up an image or a smell or a concept of that strawberry tart or that pink elephant, and then attempt to cancel it out. It's just not very effective to try to conjure up the absence of something. And so people who are using pain dialing marketing are really kind of hurting themselves, because it's actually really difficult for people to envision the absence of something. It's much easier to envision something that you desire to move closer towards. And so that's the first distinction, is between towards versus away marketing and buyer personas, and how people are ultimately incentivized or motivated. Needless to say, desire-based marketing is much higher vibration, far more positive and optimistic, and if you hold to the concept that people will be more likely to remember how you made them feel, this is really critical in terms of how you build a relationship with your audience. If you're out there scaring them, making them uncomfortable, doing a lot of that pain dialing marketing and messaging, it could potentially damage the relationship that you have with your audience, not to mention that lack of efficacy. The second buyer persona that's worth understanding is having an internal versus external sense of motivation, or how you're persuaded. And none of this is more right or more wrong in terms of the person and how they're motivated. It's merely a spectrum, and many people fall at different degrees along that spectrum. Someone may be very highly internally motivated or externally, or somewhere in the middle. So internal focus and motivation is a person who kind of just goes off on their own and reflects on what they really want. Maybe they make a list of pros and cons and ultimately come to a conclusion about what they need or want. want. A person who is a little bit more externally driven will need to have a conversation with someone else. And again, one is not better than the other. We're all just different. And we can even be different for different things. So for example, somebody could be highly internally motivated when they're selecting like a book to read or a journal or something like that, but maybe they're more externally motivated when they're deciding on a vacation spot. So there can be degrees of difference even across different types of purchasing. So the thing to note about internal decision makers is that they need to be able to kind of go off on their own and think about it and reflect on it and come to their conclusion. External decision makers absolutely need to be able to have a conversation with someone else. And that could be their partner, family member, a good friend. And it can even include the need to see a testimonial, a review, or some type of commentary from other people who have had the experience. And of course, as I mentioned, some people are going to like combining both. They're going to be somewhere in the middle of the spectrum where they need a little bit of internal reflection as well as some external conversation or third-party validation. So coming at it from a messaging or marketing perspective, it's really beneficial if you include both in your marketing. So ensuring that you allow for the time for that person to go off and reflect and decide, to do their own self-contemplation about whatever it is that they're choosing, or allow them the time to go and speak to someone else. There are unfortunately people out there who will try to shame someone for requesting time to go and speak with a partner or family. They'll actually try to make it seem as though they're too juvenile to make the decision for themselves, and that's just ridiculous. Barring even these different buyer personas, many people simply have agreements within their household to have conversations before purchases are made, especially bigger ticket purchases. So ensuring that you have allowed the time and space for whatever decision-making conversations need to happen, and also being respectful as someone is telling you this is what they need in order to make their decisions. The next buyer persona is spontaneous decision makers versus complete study. So this is one that I have personally encountered quite a bit, and perhaps you have as well. So the spontaneous decision maker is somebody who decides they need something. So let's say something breaks, or they just simply realize they need to buy something that they don't have. They go online, they look at a few things, and they make a purchase. It's easy enough for them to look at a couple of different choices and just decide. The complete study person needs to be able to do research. They need to look at 50 different options, perhaps at multiple different stores or multiple different vendors or service providers, and then do their list, their pros and their cons. Maybe they're reading reviews, they're doing all of these different types of investigations. They're looking at specs, they're looking at whatever is relevant to that purchasing decision, and then they're making their decision, and it's going to take them longer. It just is. So again, being respectful of both types of buyers. And I think it's helpful to have this awareness even for yourself. So my funny story that I've shared countless times was the first time buying a large piece of furniture with another person, and having been single prior to that for many years, buying things for myself, being capable of knowing my budget and just making a decision based on what I needed. Having to learn how to compromise and negotiate and weigh out all of these different things with another person who is more of a complete study and who needs that extra time to do all that research and looking at all of the pluses and the minuses and looking at all of the different options and really weighing everything out very carefully. It is very beneficial to understand that neither style of purchasing is wrong. In fact, I learned very beneficially that slowing down my decision making was really good for me. It was actually really helpful. And I learned how to become a little bit more careful of a buyer. And by the same token, the other party can be influenced in a positive way as well. It's just important that there's an awareness to work together. And when you're talking about your own messaging and marketing as an entrepreneur or a content creator, understanding that some people like things very quickly. They'll immediately become your fan and follow you everywhere and maybe buy something. And then other people are going to follow you for years, perhaps. They may get on your newsletter, they may follow you on social media, whatever types of platforms you use to attract your audience, and they may follow you for 2 or 3 years before they buy something. And of course, some people will never buy something, but it's important to understand that because you're in it for a long game. It is a long-term relationship. It is not a fling, and you will have people who are that complete study, and they really need to get to know you. They really need to do their research, and they really need that time to decide what they think and what they like. The next buyer persona is big picture versus little details. And this is one where I really frequently see terrible advice being given in terms of marketing and messaging. And the advice that I see that I think is really problematic is don't bother including all the little details. Just give them the outcome. Just tell them what they can get quickly from this product or service. And while that may work for some people to just have that big picture, like, okay, if you do this program, you're going to have this eventual result, and that's what you're aiming for. However, there are a lot of people, a rather large group of them, who really need the logistical little details. They need to know the day and time. They need to know the how, the when, the where, the method of delivery. How is this all going to work? And this applies whether we're talking about a service or a product. There are people that are quite content to just get a snapshot, bird's eye view of that big picture, and then they will come along for the ride. There are plenty of other people, though, who really need to know it's going to be every Thursday morning at 10 a.m. It's going to happen for 6 weeks straight, or a break in the middle, or there's going to be this type of platform. We're doing things over Zoom, or we're doing it this way, we're doing it that way, and the length of the meetings will be about 45 minutes. Like, there are just people who need that, and if they don't get that from you, they will never buy from you. And so if you have those people that are kind of lurking in your audience and they've seemed like they've been really interested, but they haven't bought something, it could very well be one of these things that I'm describing is a need that hasn't been met. So being respectful of both ends of that spectrum and ultimately providing both. You don't want to leave out the big picture or the ultimate outcome. That's important too. Being as descriptive as you can, but also not neglecting the small details that are really critical. And it's practical too, right? It's not just a buyer persona. There are plenty of people who are in situations where they need to know the day and time. They have to arrange childcare, or they have to work around job hours, or they have to work around some other life priority. And it's important to be respectful and mindful of those possibilities. These are based on neuroscience, and they're just kind of quick little tips that will make your content more effective, more engaging. So the first thing is that we have about 20 seconds upon getting started with a bit of content to make something relevant from that first glance. So whether we're talking about audio, video, blog, social media posts, even some of your longer form content, catching attention immediately is really important, especially in this day and age where there is just so much information. Most people are completely overwhelmed between their inbox, social media, the messages they're getting from people in their world, and whatever else they're being exposed to. It's very difficult to pick and choose what to attend to. So it's really important to say or do something captivating. And I don't mean to do something that's just like stupid and crazy to just get attention. I mean, actually put out there the value of what you're sharing, letting them know up front, what is this about and why is it relevant or important for them? The second one has to do with our attention span, and I do recognize that attention spans will differ, perhaps greatly, across different people, and when we're talking about things like neurodivergence, it can differ even more. But in general, we really only have about 15 to 20 minutes of attention in order to deliver a valid message. So that's not to say that you can never ever do a longer form type of content. It is to say, though, that it is valuable if you're going to do that to build in brain breaks. So something I wish more educators were familiar with, many of them are, but maybe some aren't, is the importance of brain breaks. Every 15 to 20 minutes, or as frequently as is realistic depending on the format, allowing for a bit of a checkout. Because here's what happens. If we don't create the brain break or the pause for the audience, their brain will automatically do it, and they'll just check out without your permission anyway. So they're going to lose information. They're going to miss something important that's being said. So you can kind of structure your content in a way that you're putting the important material up front instead of doing all of that buildup, 20 minutes of buildup to get to the key points. Often they'll just miss it. By the time they get there, they've already long ago checked out. So brain breaks can be very powerful and beneficial. And if it's relevant, you're in a position where you can keep your content to shorter than 15 to 20 minutes, even better. And the third tip is, after teaching something new, if you are in an educational context, you have about 24 hours to make that material relevant to their life directly so that that material sticks. So giving some kind of an action or takeaway that directly applies it can be very helpful. And the more simple and the more specific it is, the more likely it is that they will actually do it. So if you send them off with some 10-step process that's going to take 3 hours to try it, and they're relatively new audience member and perhaps don't yet have a level of investment with your work, it's probably never going to happen. And after that 24-hour period, they'll eventually forget what you said, what you taught them. It's a lot better to give them an easy 2-minute takeaway that's just one easy thing for them to try out on their own that will help to reinforce the new learning that they've had. And providing a variety of different learning formats, auditory, visual, kinesthetic, can be very beneficial with that reinforcement as well, because we do all learn differently. Some of us visually need to see words on the screen. And then a lot of people are also kinesthetic learners, meaning they have to do something with that material in order to learn. That's why note-taking can sometimes be beneficial, because it's a physical method of reinforcing something that they're learning. So by taking some of these factors into account, you can help to make your content that much more engaging. And if you are doing marketing and messaging work, you can make that even more effective. I hope this was helpful for you. And if you enjoyed this, you can follow me at transformcreate.com, where I have even more messaging and mindset related tips. And until next time, I wish you the most magical and creative rest of your day. Thanks for listening. This is Christine Collins at transformcreate.com.